Hey everyone, my name's Alan McLaren. I am the co-founder at Strata Originals. And on this podcast, as you know, we interview originals. As the name implied, these originals are folks who stand out by the lessons and the stories they share to help us learn and grow as leaders and as human beings. CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs, time to pay attention because we got a guy that's going to help you understand your world. Jerome Myers, he's an award-winning engineer turned business strategist, and he helps leaders navigate post-exit transitions. And you all know that if you haven't done one yet, you want to do one, time to listen to Jerome today. Through his Navigator program and Dreamcatchers podcast, he guides founders through key life transitions and helping them to build a lasting legacy and contribute meaningful to their communities. I had the pleasure on being on Jerome's podcast last month, and I thought I'd bring his brilliance to our family. So, dude, welcome to Strata Originals.
My best Canadian friend. Glad to be
Right.
with you, man.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you
it.
for
Your
having me.
only Canadian friend. Let's let go.
No, no,
Got
no. I
more?
know
Okay,
people all
good.
over the world.
Because there's 30, almost 40 million people here now. So we have friends around the world. That's good. Hey, tell me about the Dreamcatchers podcast. Like, where did that name come from? Let's start there.
Yeah, man, this is a wild thing. So before, what is that thing where you called in on the phone lines? It was like conference call. It was really hot social media, then it died off really quickly. What was the name of that thing? I can't remember the name of it, but we were doing conference calls before conference calls were cool or in vogue. And every 2 weeks, I would just get a group of folks on the call. It was called a tribe call, and they talk about some recent success they had and how they achieved it. We started recording that, and then it evolved because if you didn't get it real time, then you probably didn't get it. You didn't listen to it. I was like, man, this whole podcasting thing is cool. I wonder what would happen if we turn this into a podcast. And so in December of 2018, we launched the Dreamcatchers podcast. And the first call was from a buddy that I had in college named Duran Chandler, who was part of my journey when I got into multifamily real estate, and he was telling his story of becoming debt free in his 30s and a bunch of other stuff after getting through student debt and never actually breaking six figures up to that point. And so I was like, man, this is cool. And we started getting feedback, more and more feedback about how it was inspiring folks. And so we built the Dreamcatchers podcast to inspire, educate, and give direction for people who are out there looking to make their dreams a reality. There's a lot of people who chase their dreams, but there's
Mhm.
few who catch them. And we really wanted to focus on catching. We really wanted to focus on completion because I think in a world of mediocrity, a lot of people are spending their time saying, "Oh, I'm doing this or I'm doing that," but they never actually complete it.
Love it. Well, we're going to get into a lot of the depth of the work you do with founders, but let's get started with an icebreaker.
Okay.
Jerome, if you had a time machine, would you go forward or backward, and why?
Always forward. I believe my future is better than my past. And so there's nothing back there that I really want to go back to. I think all the good things are ahead of me. And it's funny because I think there's some people who are like, man, if I could go back and spend more time with grandma or grandpa or something like that. But no, for me, it's all forward.
Love it. That's it's how you think of the world. It's a beautiful thing. So, but for a moment, let's go backwards and figure out how you got to this work. So tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, so my last job in corporate America was building a $20 million vision for a Fortune 550 company. I was employee number two. We had $0 in revenue on January 13th. By the end of September, I had 175 people on my team. And by the end of the year, $20 million in rev and $6 million in profit. December 24th at 4:55, I get a call and it goes something like this. Hey, Jerome, we're going to lay half the team off. I'm like, no, we're not. It's like, yeah, you and I have been going back and forth about this for a few weeks and I made a decision. Like, yeah, but that's not the right answer. And we went back and forth for a few more minutes. He said, "Hey, look, man, I'm going to spend the rest of this year with my family. I'll talk to you in the new year." And he hung up on me. And I was like, "What in the world is going on?" Now, to give context to that conversation, the person that I reported to, I talked to them every other week and saw them once a quarter. So for them to say, hey, we're going to lay folks off, it just felt out of place. But when it's not your company, you end up in a
Mhm.
space of having to answer to other folks. And so it was at that point that I went through what I felt like was a traumatic experience. I'd never been laid off before. I didn't even want to lay people off. I didn't think that the majority of them needed to be, but I wanted to make it as objective as possible. And so I spent that week in between Christmas and New Year's figuring out who was going to stay and who was going to go. And we came back in the new year, made the announcements, put the team back together again, and made another run for another 20 million, another 6 million in profit, and with the team that was much smaller. So we were lean and mean. And it was Thanksgiving this year where I stood up in front of the team and I said, "Hey, I don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the year. I don't think you should spend all your money on Black Friday." And I just felt all my leadership credibility ooze out because I knew it wasn't just me that was going through those conversations. It was happening all over the country. We tend to balance budgets by cutting headcount, and usually, and especially in service businesses, it's the most expensive line item. So that's the place where you have to go. But I wanted to buck the stop with me, and so I decided to exit corporate. And it was there that I experienced all of the things that we experience as founders when we exit a company. It's called the founder's exit paradox. It's the unraveling of your identity from the title or the company or insert whatever you want to call your baby. And so I stepped out and started doing real estate. Thought I was going to buy an apartment building that didn't work initially. So I started fixing and flipping houses, started calling on people who I'd worked with in the past and they didn't answer my call because I wasn't able to sign contracts anymore. And there weren't promotion opportunities with me. And it was very frustrating very quickly. And I realized that, I had to become a new person. But in that instance, I realized that many of the relationships had changed. And when you look at it, if you think about the five people you spend the most time with professionally, um, three of those are probably people you work with, right? And so you think about losing 60% of the people you talk to on a regular basis from one day to the next. It becomes an evolution, a transformation, a change in your life that you can't actually prepare yourself for unless you move those people out of the space in front of your actual transition. So we're doing the real estate stuff, and I realize how lonely I am, Alan. Really, being a real estate investor sounds really sexy until you realize nobody wants to talk to you unless they want to complain about their apartment, or the investor wants to know when they're going to get to money. And so I was like, well, what do I actually miss? Because this isn't fulfilling. It just solves the problem of creating income for me. And I was like, the only thing that I missed was when people would come into my office and say, I couldn't have done that without you. And it was the development, the leading, the coaching, the consulting that we would do with the team. And so I was like, how can I do more of that? And I happened to have a financial advisor who was in between coaches. I was like, hey, well, give me a shot. Let me see what we can do. And sure enough, we had success. He won Financial Rep of the Year, and then he got promoted into higher levels of leadership. And eventually, he was reporting to the managing partner. And I was like, man, we really made inroads here. And so we spent time helping people figure out how to make more money. The promise of the coaching program was double your time off, double the money you make, double your charitable giving. And I was like, man, this is pretty sexy and it works. And we kept doing it. And what I realized again was it wasn't fulfilling. I
Mm.
wasn't actually helping people figure out how to make more money wasn't the thing that got me excited. I'm really good at it, but it wasn't the thing that got me excited. It was them actually finding their purpose and creating impact and meaning. So we moved further down the line and we started working with founders who were exiting, and we found this space. I was in the back of a business conference and a guy was given his 7 steps to having a double unicorn exit, and he goes through it and he's like, yeah, I was thinking and drinking, and then my wife told me that I was having an existential crisis,
Mhm.
And I was like, I've never heard that before. I wonder what that is. And so I asked, I said, how'd you know that you were, well, he didn't say his wife told him. I asked him, I said, how did you know that your wife, how did you know that you were having an existential crisis? He said, my wife told me. I said, oh, okay. And so what I realized there was that most people think they're hiding it, and the people closest to them know that they're struggling, but a lot of people avoid saying anything about it because it's kind of awkward. And so then the next question I asked him was, well, how'd you get through it? How'd you get over it? And he said, I'll let you know when I figure it out. And
Bam.
so imagine having an exit for over $2 billion and not being able to figure out what your next is. And so I started doing research and I was like, well, there's got to be somebody out here who's the world leading expert on this thing because it happens over and over and over again. And it's not just leaving as a founder, it could be retiring, it can be leaving corporate America, but who's helping people figure this out? And I found one article. It was from Harvard Business Review and it said, hey, congratulations, you sold your business. Prepare to be depressed. And I was like, that can't be
Can't be.
what we have to expect after building something for 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
And so we embarked on this journey to help people exit to excellence. And we're committed to doing that.
You know what's really cool is it's a combination, I think, of your experience when you uh, had to let people go and left, and then your insatiable curiosity, right? Kind of led you to this thing that I would call not only your expertise, but your passion as well, right? So,
Yeah.
so when entrepreneurs think through how do I come up with something, asking really good questions like you did kind of took the rest of your life, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we believe that you come up with something by figuring out the problem you want to eradicate from the face of the planet. For us, it's unnecessary suffering of founders.
Beautiful.
And then who you want to solve that problem for. And for us as founders, because they are what make the world go round. Business owners are the ones that improve the world, and you don't want to put them out the pasture because they're really talented and capable.
So if you can share with me a story of success from one of your founders that started working with you and how long it took and where they were and where they ended up on the other side in a fulfillment place. Any thoughts on
Yeah,
that might be?
there's a few people that come to mind, but this person is one of my favorites because it's a female one, and it's at times it's difficult to find female founders. So she committed a decade to building up dental practices, and so she had 6 practices when we showed up, and she was overworked, over stressed out. She'd been through a divorce. Her teenage daughter was in all of the right schools, and they had all the activities, but she didn't have any time for herself because it was either working, being chairside, being the owner, being mom. Like there was nothing, and so she was burning out, and she was burning out quickly, which is one of the reasons that people have to unexpectedly exit their business. Burnout's one, and then there's the 3Ds, which is death, divorce, and disease. But she was experiencing burnout, and she was like, I can't do this anymore. I've got to get out. And so she went on the journey, started down the path of selling the one of the practices by herself. And we got involved. He's like, you don't want to do that. The pricing is off. But she just wanted out, right? She just wanted relief. And so she was willing to take whatever was brought to her. And so we pulled that back, renegotiated it, helped her get some better terms and a better experience from that, and really spent the time explaining like the impact of the things. Meanwhile, we were working with her on how to organize the other things so that that would be more livable. And so, in the end, what she ended up doing was hiring a regional manager to actually run the stuff and do a lot of the admin that she didn't have to do. Because, I mean, imagine going office to office in the metro area. Um, it becomes exhausting. So it was that, but then it was like, how do we make sure that we get her back healthy? Right. And so uh, after another sell of an office, she spent time in Europe relaxing a little bit and exploring. And now it's like, okay, so we sold pieces of the business. but we still wanted to keep some income going, right? So a lot of people optimize just to try to get that big payday and nest egg.
Yeah.
But once you have the nest egg, you've cut off your all your income. And so we structure this where she's got the nest egg, she's got the income, she was able to buy what is in and up becoming her dream house. It wasn't before the renovations, but she started doing the projects, and so when she's best when she's creating, and so she's made the renovations that have really in a very short time, by the way, to make the house just an amazing house. Was able to move back closer to family because originally she was 4 or 5 hours away.
Yeah.
The business that she kept runs without her having to show up to the office. She goes months at a time without going to the office, and she's really working maybe 3 or 4 hours a week, which is just meetings with the regional manager and maybe showing face to some of the office managers that are still in the fold. And then we combine that with what are the other activities that you want to do in post exit life. And so her daughter's in high school, and so she wants to be involved. So PTA, fundraisers, that kind of stuff is really important for her. And really thinking about, well, okay, now that I've kind of recuperated from this burnout, do I want to buy other dental offices with my general manager in place and grow that and expand that? Do I just want to keep the office that I have? And so exploring what we call the post exit portfolio. In addition to that, she was able to take some of the cash and put it in real estate syndications, so that she could get some diversified income instead of having all of her wealth tied up in the practice. Um, and those things we believe are helping her really find fulfillment. And then there's just the self journey, of really understanding who she is at this point in her life, exploring love again and relationships and that kind of stuff. Um, so it when we think about founders, there's 6 areas that we're really looking to help them flourish in, and it's their self image. So who am I without the business? The relationships outside of the people that I used to work with every day. Who am I spending time with? The work. You know, if I'm not working 40 or 60 or 80 hours a week, well, what do I do with that time? And how do I make an impact? Then health, prosperity, and significance is level 6, which is, how do I make a big impact?
I want to dive in. I
And
want to
for
dive into those in a little depth because I think there's the founders that are listening to this. What's an interesting point that you made is you would think that people would say, "Well, I'll sell it, then I'll figure it out." And what you're saying is you need to be ready for what that looks like and what that feels like. And there's no way you'll know until you get it right and have better expectations. So you're working before they even think about an exit.
We think it's a terrible idea to go into an exit without knowing what your next is. When you do that, you are exiting from instead of exiting to. And
Oh,
exiting from
yeah,
is you're moving into a void. There's emptiness. And we want founders to exit with clarity and confidence.
yeah.
And so that's our whole game. And if we can do that, then we believe that the suffering is only pain and discomfort instead of something that they get stuck in like quicksand.
Well, it's interesting is, when I don't know how many times I've been dealing with CEOs who maybe dropped 20, 30, 40 million on their in their bank account. And it was such a horrible process that they're completely unhappy. And everybody would look at them and go, "What's wrong with
What could
you?
you do?
How
Yeah.
can you be
And,
unhappy?"
yeah.
When we're
And
talking about, money's not the answer, right? It's not the answer.
so it's a common misconception that money solves problems. Money solves money problems. But
Yeah,
if you have a problem that can be solved by money, you have money, you don't have a problem. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is kind of accepted as what we need. And unfortunately, money only solves the first 2 levels of the 5 levels of that pyramid.
yeah,
And so if you have money, but you're still trying to figure out love and belonging and your self-actualization and impact to others, like money's not going to help you do that.
yeah. Very interesting. So why don't we explore? you've got a lovely document on your LinkedIn that talks about the five mistakes that every founder makes. And let's start, and I know you've touched on a little bit, but let's just define the founder's exit paradox. So tell me about that. Then we'll go through all five of those mistakes and get you to expand on it with your expertise. So tell me about the founder's exit paradox. What is that?
So the exit paradox is, I think, best described as the decoupling or the unraveling of your identity from the identity of the business that you've spent so much time building and creating. When you've done that for multiple decades, it's very challenging for most people to unravel that. And so we want to help them through that process by one, making it clearer on who they are,
Yeah,
not what they do, but who they are, the being.
yeah,
Um, and the other piece of the why we call it a paradox is because, hey, something great just happened.
yeah.
For many people, it's like hitting the lottery because they have more money in their bank account than they've ever had. Okay, boom, more money in your bank account. Now what? You
Yeah.
got more time than you've ever had. Uh-oh. I've
No.
got the two resources that people are seeking, and I don't know what to do with them because I've never had this much freedom before. Freedom can become a prison if it's not utilized well, and so that's why we call it the exit. We call it a paradox. Um, and then you want to move into the five
Yeah.
mistakes right
Let's go
away.
to the so you've got the paradox. Let's go to the five key steps. So first one is neglecting personal reflection and preparation. Let's talk through that.
Yeah. So, what most business owners or founders are doing, believing, expecting, achieving, they don't spend any time reflecting.
Hmm.
They don't do well with compliments. They they spend all their time striving for the next thing.
Yeah.
And the most important thing you can do when you're trying to figure out who you are without the latest accomplishment or achievement is the reflection. And so in our process, we call next, nourish is the first step. We
Hmm.
want to nourish you. We want you to be able to see that you add value, whether you're at the business or at the company or you're not, that you can make an impact, whether you're at that business or not. Because there's so many folks who just decide that they can't do anything else because it's all they've ever done. And,
Yeah.
while that's not true, that's the story that they tell themselves.
Interesting. So one of the things that I think you mentioned, which I think would be bears repeating, is people have their identity wrapped up in their work. And
Mhm.
oftentimes, especially in the family business world, especially if you have a legacy family, it's tied to that. And how do you break away from that and make sure that you, as a human, can stand on your own 2 feet? It's a fascinating challenge, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, I think in America, um, we more than any other country identify with our titles.
Mm,
We don't talk about our hobbies. In a lot of other countries, when I've traveled, I've experienced, they don't talk about their work. They talk about what they do in their free time.
yeah, interesting. Because when they put you in a box, they don't ask you about your job, right? They ask you
Nobody cares how
who
many
you
hours you worked.
impacted, who you impacted, who you touched. And I was just on the call with a gentleman who actually said to me, I don't think I'm making a big impact on the world, but his world was the macro billion people world, as opposed to you just touched that one human being. You've made an impact on the world. And these leaders that you work with impact tens of thousands of people over time, don't they?
100%. And this was part of the way that we felt like we could expand our impact. It's the ripple effect.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah,
ripple effect.
absolutely. So the second one is overlooking relationship dynamics. To me, that is a monster mistake, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll never forget having a mentor and him being ready to exit, and his wife's telling him, "The kitchen is mine. It's great that you're coming home, but don't come in my kitchen."
Yeah, yeah.
And just the thought of there's territories, and when you have the freedom of time and money, things change, and
Mm,
collateral damage can happen if you're not careful. There's a lot of people who get to that place and they get divorces, or they
mm.
ruin their reputation and relationship with their kids. And it's like, man, you worked all these years and a few poor choices because you didn't handle the success well,
Yeah.
just destroyed things that took a very long time to build.
Interesting. And the relationship dynamics also are the relationships you had were tied up in work, but they're not necessarily anymore. And if you didn't invest in the outside relationships, you're, as you suggested, I'm lonely, and lonely people don't do well.
They don't do well, and they do things out of desperation that create a mess, a big, big mess, even if it's unintentional. Fortunately or unfortunately, we're going to get our needs met.
Yeah.
The problem is, are we doing it through legitimate or illegitimate means?
Yeah, that's challenging. And the other relationship dynamic that has been proven is the true happiness to the other side, whether you're older or whatever it happens to be, is the power and quality of the relationships you have. And if they're all tied up in work and that's gone and you haven't invested in it, so it's really good that you tell them about that so they can plan over that, whether it takes 6 or 8 months or a year to exit, start to understand those investments you have to make to be truly fulfilled over time, right?
Yeah, I was doing a presentation at MIT, and one of the ladies that was on the panel, we were interviewing people who had exited, and she said, there are people who I paid for years who won't answer my call now
So brutal. Yeah, I know.
for years, and they won't answer my call. And she said, if there's anybody in your workplace that you had a relationship with because you paid them, that's in your top five, take them out and replace them with somebody else who isn't, because it's likely that that same thing is going to happen to you, and there's nothing more painful than that.
It's disappointing uh, because as a leader, you think that they respect you for who you are, but sometimes the title matters, doesn't it?
The title always matters, unfortunately,
Right?
but
Right?
you got to remember that it's not you, it's the title,
Yeah.
and the privileges are often um, reserved for the title. It's
Yeah.
the assistant goes with the title, the parking space goes with the title, the vehicle allowance goes with the title.
Yeah. The ego goes with the title. It's- But it's such a powerful lesson. I remember when I left the company where, I had 150 odd employees. I never thought I was building friendships in the traditional way. They were employees that I wanted to treat with respect and allow them to flourish and do that. But I didn't never misstate it for a friendship. And it wasn't. As soon as I was gone, it's gone. And that's, it, even though it, it's still a little sting,
Oh,
right?
it's more than a little sting.
Right?
Because I mean, you think about it, you think about the sacrifices that the people make, and your gratitude and appreciation for them, and believe that it's reciprocal, only to find out, hey, the new regime is in town,
Yeah.
and maybe it wasn't as deep as meaningful as you thought it was.
Yeah. No, great lessons for founders and entrepreneurs that are going to build their business. Just recognize that as well. So your third mistake is ignoring the importance of redefining work. Wow.
Yeah, many people think, oh, well, I'm going to go on vacation for a year, or I'm going to take a year off and do nothing. Don't do anything. That's what people tell you. Don't join any boards, don't start any new businesses, just take a year off and do nothing. And it's like, you've been producing since you were 5, right? Most people have been put on the treadmill, and you just keep going, and you just keep going. And so now you're all of a sudden you're going to do nothing.
Mhm.
It will kill you. Literally, it will kill you. This is why people say they're never going to retire. that's not the answer. Never retiring is not the answer. Redefining what work is the answer. And so one of the fastest ways that it's easy for people to get clear on this is to decide the activities that you get paid for and the ones that you don't.
Mm,
And once you know the activities that you get paid for, then you figure out how to charge for those. And the ones that you don't, hey, that's you lending your talents and capabilities in a volunteer standpoint. And so you can do both without any conflict or confusion.
interesting. Very cool. Number four is one that should be number one on everybody's list, which is health and well-being.
Yeah, so it's very interesting how we got here with the health and well being because many people trade their health and well being in for money, only to find out that they have to trade the money in back in for the health. And so we want folks to be focusing on that. And uh, we believe that health is negatively impacted because stress causes us to do things that are detrimental to our health. And so, what can you do to turn down the stress so that you can really focus on optimize your health is the way that we think about improving health.
Now, when you're talking to your founders early on in their process before they even have an exit, oftentimes, the stress I mean, CEOs are in a tough spot. I mean, interest rates and HR stuff and pressures are over the top. That's why they're well compensated for a reason, right? It's not the easiest thing in the world. But have you come across a lot of those who self-medicate with drugs, alcohol, and don't turn into, yoga and working out and doing other things? Have you seen that in your world? And how do you help those people? And how do you have that tough conversation?
Well, I think they realize pretty quickly that what they're doing is suboptimal.
Yeah.
We can't convince them. We're not here to tell them what's right or wrong ever. Um, we're here to force them into honest self reflection, though. And
Mm,
so, in the honest self reflection, we ask questions like, hey, how do you feel after you use a substance?
yeah.
Are you groggy? Do you get a good night's rest?
Yeah.
Insert, insert, insert.
Yeah.
And when they answer the questions negatively, then we just ask, hey, is that what you're going to continue to do?
Yeah.
Or is there a better option for you? And usually they make really good decisions on the backside of that because it's their decision. We're not making anybody do anything because it's not for us to decide.
Yeah.
um, and the fact of the matter, like the discipline that they had to have in order to get to where they got to, uh, probably moves to a different space. So if you're really
Mm,
disciplined because you stayed at work for 60 hours a week, now maybe you spend 5 hours working out or something like that, or working on yourself. So maybe your morning routine gets extended some, and
interesting.
that becomes magical
Yeah. And
because
yeah. But sorry.
they that becomes magical because you're getting a return on the
Yeah.
investment and the focus.
And when you think about it, what's the only asset that you carry through the rest of your life? It's that, right? It's that and it's funny that you don't realize that when you're in your 20s or 30s or even 40s for that matter, because your body's still kind of reacting as it should. But when you get into a little more gray hair, that age wins every time, right? And so, but most exits are folks that are in their 40s and 50s and older, right? And so, except for unicorns, but that's a whole different story. And if they're not focused on it, boy, they got to get focused on it quick, or else it'll be a very short window with their money, right?
The quality of life is so important, and giving up everything, um, you sacrifice for so long in order to get to that outcome.
Yeah.
Um, it just becomes a mess.
And the last one, is certainly not the least one, and you talk about it a lot, is legacy. Like, how do you
Mhm.
cultivate a lasting legacy for yourself and your foundation, whatever you choose to do?
Yeah, we come back to who are the people that you should serve and what problem are you eradicating from the face of the planet. I fundamentally believe that we're placed on this planet to serve and help others. And the only way that you find fulfillment or significance, as we call it in our model, is through service. And so if you think that things are bad, go help somebody and you'll find out that they aren't as bad as you think they are. If you want people to remember you, go help somebody and you'll realize that you had a big impact on their life in a very meaningful way. The question that many founders are trying to figure out is how do I do it at scale? And so you mentioned the person who was trying to help billions of people. And I've met a few people say, hey, I want to help a billion people do this or do that. Um, I don't think that you have to focus there in order to create significance. You can do that in your house. You can do that in your neighborhood. You can do that in your community. You can do that in your city. You can do that in your state. You can do that in your country.
Yeah,
And the goal, though, is taking the focus off of you because you've bought your freedom, right? Uh, both your from a financial standpoint, from a time standpoint, and probably even a location standpoint.
yeah,
And now that you have those resources available to you as a fiduciary, how do you allocate them to get the maximum return?
yeah. Brilliant.
And so many people mismanage it and they lose all the stuff, and then they're back in the bondage of figuring out how to solve the money problem.
Yeah.
But I think if you actually apply the resources well, uh, many people become even wealthier through the service of other people, and that wasn't their focus this time.
And it is, and every book, whether you're reading a religious text or any spiritual text, that's the source of true happiness is serving others. I mean, that's doesn't matter what you get, whether it's giving somebody, holding a hand, opening a door, pick it at the smallest level to the biggest level. That's how we get true fulfillment. That's been proven over and over. And what I love about your model is you're not just, what you would think is, well, I'm going to coach you through your exit. That's the tactical. You're
Mhm.
focused much more on the human in the process. That is very strategic because on the other side of that is not a starting point. Hopefully, it's a continuation of something you've built, and now you've got those other tools. It's a very helpful process that you take them through.
I really appreciate you recognizing that. We feel like we're the only people in the country who focus on the founders post exit experience.
Yeah,
Yeah, everybody else is incentivized to get them to the transaction.
yeah,
Maybe the financial advisor makes it through that portal
yeah,
and gets to manage the finance or the resources that come on that from the exit.
yeah.
But I think all of the service providers in general hit that wall of the exit. They get their compensation and they're off to the next one. And the founders left by themselves trying to figure out what they're going to do. And so having a post exit plan is extremely important from my perspective.
No, it is, and it's just I'll repeat it again because I want to make sure that message is there. It's a post-exit plan that's done pre-exit, right? So it's not transactional and saying, once you exit, we'll start this. No, you're the human that's done this for 20 years. You built some
Mhm.
habits, good, bad, and ugly. They don't translate onto the other side very well.
Mhm.
So as opposed to, because a lot of them, as you know, I work with a lot of those folks as well, and some of them are really broken,
Mhm.
and they're really broken, and their confidence is shattered, and it's the
Mhm.
paradox, right? Confidence is shattered. They don't understand what do I do, who am I? All that stuff, and
Mhm.
you got to get that right in your life, no matter what happens. So you're helping the human inside that, and it's just such a. I applaud you for doing that. It's good work, and I'm sure for you it's fulfilling work, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. We're committed to the next 15 years of helping all of these baby boomers make their transition out and for those folks in Gen X who are getting there earlier than many people. We think this transfer of wealth is going
Big one.
to be a huge opportunity for everybody involved. And from our perspective, people are just focused on the actual financial assets
Yeah.
instead of the people who are coming into freedom
Yeah.
like they've not experienced before.
Yeah. That's almost a scary thing, right? People, that's what people want, but be careful what you have because you're not ready for it sometimes, right? Yeah, that's very cool. Um, what what have I not asked you that you want to share with our audience? Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you say, you know what? I think this is one message I'd like to leave people with, and then I'll ask people how they can find you.
I, the one message I would like to leave people with is your dreams should be real. And
Mm,
you may not have heard that in a long time. You may think that you don't have any more dreams because your dream was to build a business that you built. Unfortunately, 80% of your wealth is trapped in the business, if not more. And so unlocking that is a bit of a puzzle. 80% of businesses that get listed for sale don't actually transact. Of the 20% that successfully sell, only less 75% of people regret it. So think about that. If I'm in the 20% that actually sell, I only have a 25% chance of actually being excited about having sold. We consider that exiting the excellence, and we want to help as many people do that because that is the dream that comes true.
mm,
It's kind of like marriage, right? You go through the ceremony, and like that's the big hurrah, much like your transaction day when the wire hits. This is a
yeah,
big hurrah, but it's not about that day as much as it is about the life that you build on the other side of that day.
love it.
And, life isn't over because you exit it. Your career isn't over because you exit it. Um, the excellence is on the other side. And we're just happy to see people be able to buy their freedom, right? And then be able to allocate those most precious resources
Love it.
to make a huge impact and get the biggest return possible.
Awesome. It's your life work, and you're good at it. And I'm so happy that you and I are going to help lots of people in our lives. So that's really cool. Dude,
Honored.
how do the people that are listening find you? They need,
Yeah, man, we've got this really cool thing called the Neo assessment. And if folks want to go check that out as a complimentary gift for staying on the pod and listening to the pod for this long, they can go to theexitparadox.com/assessment and answer 35 questions and figure out who they're going to be post exit. It's a really cool quiz that gives them all kinds of insights into what's going to help them find fulfillment on the backside.
would I make an assumption by not even looking at those 35 questions that even if you don't exit, it's a great self-reflection tool?
If you want to know who you are, you're going to have that answer in a way that you can't get from Myers Briggs, Colby, Strength Finders, or any of those other profiles out there.
Awesome. Jerome, this is as good as I would have hoped it would be. Just another conversation with you of many. And on behalf of all of our listeners at Strata, thank you so much for coming on and spending 40 minutes or so with us. It was a very valuable time.
This was an honor. Thank you for having me, Alan.
See you, bye. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign.